What's going on, guys? We're back here with some more tier list action, and with the regional championship in full swing, and with several regional championships in the modern format still to come, I figured it would be a good idea to go ahead and take a look at the 20 best decks in modern, and we're going to rank them because everybody loves tier lists and having conversations about should this be S tier, why is this in D tier, etc., etc. So, for people who are looking to play an upcoming regional championship in the modern format, I know there's some in Canada, there's Vegas, there's still the European Regional Championship, plenty still to come. This is the definitive modern meta tier list for October 2025. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Be sure to use promo code Doom at checkout if you guys want to buy any singles, sealed sleeves, or deck boxes. Cool Stuff Inc. They got cool stuff, and they got it in stock. And with that out of the way, let us go ahead and begin the tier list. And we're going to kick things off with my personal favorite deck in Affinity. Now, if we take a look at the Houston Regional Championship, Affinity had a pretty decent weekend. Its conversion rate was, I think, by far the best in the tournament. Ended up putting one copy in the top 8 along with 4 in the top 32. And personally, I think Affinity is one of the best decks in Modern, which is exactly why I'm going to put it in A tier. There's only one deck in S tier. I would love to let me know in the comment section down below if you're watching this part right now. What is your guess on the only deck in S tier? So I'm gonna put everything else below S tier, but Affinity is probably the best deck in A tier. It has, I think, a pretty decent matchup spread. It's one of the few decks that can actually have a chance against combo with extremely fast Kappa Cannoneers. And you can sort of, change your play style in the post-board games when your opponent has a bunch of Wrath of the Skies to kind of slow roll your zeros a little bit more, wait a couple of turns until you can get all of the zeros and the Kappa Cannoneer all in one turn, excuse me. Esper Blink is where we're going to go next with this Overlord of the Baelmerk. Now, with the performance of Jeskai Blink over the weekend, which I'm actually going to do that after Esper Blink, I think Jeskai Blink has sort of usurped Esper Blink as far as the top Felia Ephemerate Solitude deck. And the reason for that is, well, Esper doesn't really have any early pressure. There's no one-mana creatures. There's nothing, like you can't really pressure your combo opponents and provide meaningful pressure early, so the combo decks typically have more time to set up. They don't really care about Felia Overlord because that stuff is just, it's a value machine, but most combo decks just don't really care about that kind of thing. So I'm actually going to put Esper Blink down in B tier, and then I'm going to put Jeskai Blink in A tier. Now, as far as, again, comparing and contrasting the two different Blink decks, Jeskai has a much more aggressive start and aggressive potential because it has the capability of going turn on the play, turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 hit, make a treasure, and on turn 2 you now have 3 mana to be able to go Riddler and Ephemerate. And the Esper deck doesn't have that kind of capability. So it's much more slow and plodding and playing towards a longer game, which is good in some matchups, but Modern is very combo heavy right now, and I don't think that is necessarily where you want to be in the format. As far as Esper Goryo's is concerned, it's tough. It has some very similar qualities to Esper Blink in terms of, Solitude, Ephemerate, Psychic Frog, this sort of whole package deal in Riddler as well. Riddler Frog, very powerful. But I think as far as the Goryo's plan is concerned, with Affinity being as popular as it is now, and with Affinity playing 3 copies of main deck Tormod's Crypt, I don't really think the unfair plan of Goryo's is necessarily where it was a couple of weeks ago. And as a fair deck, I think you're doing most of the things worse than Esper Blink. I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier, but I'm going to definitely put it behind Esper Blink. If I was going to play some sort of Esper, Ephemerate Psychic Frog deck, if I was dead set on that, I'd probably lean slightly towards Blink over Goryo's just because of those main deck Tormod's Crypts and Affinity. And now we get to the only deck in S tier, Primeval Titan. If you separate the Blink variants at Regional Championship Houston, which I think you should do, I think that there's enough meaningful difference between all, 3 or 4 of the Blink archetypes. Titan was the most played deck. And I'm going to be honest with you, I can't recall a big tournament where Titan was the most played deck. And I think people have finally come full circle and realized the true power of it. Now, granted, it certainly has a very high skill gap. There are certain people that are much better at playing Titan than others. But in terms of, does this deck give you the best chance to win, even if you only have a couple of weeks to learn it, I think it's that broken. It is capable of very consistently killing on turn 3, sometimes turn 2, although I think those are a little bit less likely nowadays. But yeah, it is the most powerful combo deck in the format, and even when you're not comboing, the fair plan of just Titan for a bunch of Besejus is really good against a lot of different decks. Eldrazi Ramp surprisingly had a pretty good weekend in Houston. I believe there was, I think, 1 or 2 copies in the top 32. Now, as far as its positioning in the metagame, I'm going to go ahead and put it above the Blink-style decks in B tier. I don't think it's quite on the same tier on the same level as Affinity and Jeskai Blink, but I do think it is in a pretty good spot in the metagame in terms of being able to play extremely long games with stuff like Emrakul, and you can fill your graveyard with Malevolent Rumble and Icetill Explorer. But it also kind of has this land destruction element where you can go Myco Spawn, Kicked, get a Ghost Quarter. People are skimping on basic lands nowadays, so that plan is pretty good. And you still have Kozilek's Return for Boros and Kozilek's Return Flashback. Kozilek's Return also very good against Affinity to clean up those drone tokens as well. Grixis Reanimator. Oh boy. Well, there was a period of time where Grixis Reanimator was everywhere on Magic Online. And as far as Regional Championship Houston is concerned, there were 10 people that played it at the event. Guess how many of those 10 people made day 2? 0. Yeah, I don't really think you should be playing Grixis Reanimator. Similar to Goryo's, where it's like, you have a very solid plan A, but your plan A is under heavy distress with the main deck Tormod's Crypts from Affinity, but your plan B is so much worse than Goryo's. Sure, you have Psychic Frog, and sometimes they play Riddler, but your Oculus plan B is still not good against the Graveyard Hate, so your plan B doesn't even work against Tormod's Crypts and the Graveyard Hate anyways. Domain Zoo. Domain Zoo is kind of a weird one, where leading up to the regional championship, it was kind of crushing on Magic Online. I think it won 2 or 3 challenges in the week leading up to Houston. Domain Zoo did not have a good weekend in Houston. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier, not quite as far, as down below as the Grixis Reanimator. I do think that this deck has powerful draws. In the fair matchups, it's very hard for a lot of decks like Jeskai Blink and Boros Energy to be able to beat Leyline plus Scion. But even then, more people are just including natural outs to Leyline anyways. Like, for example, Affinity has Sink into Stupor. Jeskai Blink has Felia. You have the Esper Blink decks, which have Witch Enchanter. So people just have a bunch of natural outs that they would want to play anyways to a card like Leyline of the Guild Pact. So basically what I'm getting at is that Leyline Scion, not quite what it used to be. Basking Broodscale. Broodscale combo, I'm going to put in low A tier. Basically, this deck has sort of evolved a lot over the past couple of months where, maybe if you look at a Broodscale deck from 6 months ago, it was much more all in, right? 4 Blades, 4 Urza Sagas, didn't really have a backup plan. It was basically just, I'm going to present the Broodscale combo, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to lose. Well, these Broodscale decks have certainly evolved over the past couple of months, and now they're almost getting to the point where the Broodscale combo is kind of an afterthought, and they're almost more of an Eldrazi ramp deck first and foremost, where they're playing Kozilek's Command, 3 to 4 Emrakuls, Eldrazi Temple, Ugin's Labyrinth, Devourer of Destiny, so you have this whole Eldrazi ramp package, And then for, so you have the ability to have very fast combos. This deck can still kill on turn 3, but you can also play those very long games with stuff like Rumble, K-Command, and Emrakul. So I think it kind of has the best of both worlds where you can race the combo decks, but you also can grind out the fair decks, and I think that's a pretty good place to be. Simic Birthing Ritual. I still don't really understand this deck. As far as its matchup spread, I'd have to go look at the data. I know that it's good against Amulet, and to be honest with you, if you have a good Amulet matchup, which not many people can say they do, that has to at least count for something. But as far as the rest of the matchups go, I don't think they're particularly great. You can have game against stuff like Affinity because you can search for Collector Roof off of Birthing Ritual. Sort of the same thing against Brutescale, like you can turn off their blades, but I understand that there was one player who had a very deep run in Houston with this deck, but I think I still gotta put it in C tier. I'll put it above Domain Zoo if Tiermaker will let me. I'm gonna put it in high C, just, again, you have a good Amulet matchup, but my goodness, it seems near impossible to beat an Ocelot Pride to save your life. Azorius Control. Didn't have the best weekend in Houston. I think there was one there may not have even been one in the top 32. I think there was one or two in the top 64. Oh no, there was that one person who got 9th. The one who was playing Terminus and Brain Surge, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I think it's doing okay. Maybe I'll put it in mid C tier a little bit. Maybe, yeah, I'll put it above Ritual. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of the Azorius Control deck with the Scepter Chant and the Narset Days Undoing. I understand that it has, like, Orum's Chant inherently is decent against combo decks, and you can lock some people out, but there are plenty of people who have natural outs to the Scepter Chant lock without Teferi in play if they have an instant speed way to bounce the Scepter. So you still have to play around that. You have, the Saga decks all have Needle, and they can just Needle the Scepter to prevent you from activating it. So I don't know. I just don't like the matchup spread that much with Azorius Control, and I think I think you'd be better off playing the decks in the B tier. I have this image of Psychic Frog here as a nod to the Dimir Midrange decks with like Murktide Regent and Psychic Frog. Some play Riddler, some play Kaido, Counterspell, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, that kind of stuff. One thing that I will say about Dimir, Counterspell is not what it used to be. Counterspell, for a very long time, when Murktide was the best deck, and then Dimir was the best deck for a little bit, Counterspell was one of the best answers in Modern. And to be quite frank with you, the format is just too fast for Counterspell, which, when I'm saying those words, it sounds absurd to me when I say it in my head and say it to myself, but I really think that's where we're at. And the Urza Saga decks can just play around Counterspell, right? Like, how does Dimir just doesn't really have a great answer to Saga, especially with the rules change to Saga and Harbinger, where, before you would play a Harbinger when they have a Saga on 2, now you have to slow roll it for an extra turn, let them get the second construct. It's just, I don't really think Dimir is where you want to be right now. Not willing to put it in D tier, but I'm going to put it in low C. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think a deck that I am willing to put in D tier, I guess high D tier, is Belcher, which, didn't this deck just win a Pro Tour? Pretty sure it did. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Belcher had a terrible win rate. Even at the Pro Tour, it was still only a 43% win rate. I think it was 42 in Houston. I don't believe there was a single copy in the top 32. The conversion rate was not very good. People are just prepared for it. Looking at the win rate from the Pro Tour, people were prepared for it at the Pro Tour. It's just Plummer is cracked and he, crushed everybody with Belcher. But as far as the overall win rate of Belcher is concerned, it's not very good. And people have kind of adapted and adjusted their sideboards to have a better matchup against Belcher, and that definitely has been showing. Eldrazi Tron, which is a deck that I was very, very close to playing in Houston. I ended up switching to Affinity last minute. I'm going to put Eldrazi Tron in high B, right above the kind of Gruul Eldrazi decks. I don't think I'm willing to put it in A tier just because of its completely unwinnable matchup against Amulet Titan. but I think that you're decent enough against the other, like, you can be okay against the stuff in A tier. Like, you're a main deck Karn deck, so you naturally can shut off some of Affinity's draws. You can shut off Blade of the Blood Chief pretty easily from the Broodscale deck if they don't already have it equipped. The Jeskai Blink matchup I think can be pretty tough, especially post board. Vinny's list that won Houston had 4 Charmaws in the sideboard, so good luck against that. But I think against the other like stuff below in B, C tier, I think Eldrazi Tron is pretty good against most of that stuff. So you could certainly do worse than playing Eldrazi Tron, but I don't think I would consider playing it over any of these other 3 decks in A tier. Mill, I just don't respect Mill. I never have and I never will. I don't mean to offend the Mill players out there, but it's just not a deck that I necessarily respect. I understand that it has some good matchups, but it still feels like a very, very uphill battle against stuff like Boros Energy and any of the fair decks. Like even Jeskai Blink, I feel like is probably fine against Mill. So not really a big fan of Mill. Don't really have a lot else to say. However, Is It Prowess? Talk to me. I'm going to put Is It Prowess and I'm going to actually put it above Jeskai Blink in the A tier, which might be, again, another bit of a hot take. But, I mean, it's so funny to me that this Is It Prowess deck has basically been the exact same 75 for the past 6 months, ever since Core Steel Cutter was released. Nobody has changed a single card. And the deck still keeps crushing. I mean, it put, I believe, 2 copies into the top 8, and I think 2 more in the top 32, so 4 total in the top 32. Had a pretty good win rate, had a decent conversion rate. Again, it's one of the decks that can outrace Titan. It can outrace anything. And it still gets to play some of the best sideboard cards with Consigned to Memory and Meltdown being good against Amulet and Affinity, respectively. So yeah, I think Is It Prowess is in a decent spot. It can grind with Boros because you have Expressive Iteration and Core Steel Cutter. It has extremely fast draws with Slick Shot Show Off. So yeah, I think Is It Prowess is, in a decent spot right now. Deck that is not in a decent spot is Ruby Storm. Now, I don't think I'm willing to put it quite in D tier, but I am going to put it in C tier behind the Birthing Ritual stuff. Again, just Consigned to Memory being the most played card in the format. Consigned to Memory on your Storm trigger, granted you can go again, but there's going to be some hands that have a tough time against that, and Consign can also just counter the Ruby Medallion. You can even, consign Ral triggers if they're out of spells, if they're like playing their last spell desperately to try and flip Ral, you can do that. Just like a lot of things you can do with Consign against Storm. And also people play Orm's Chant, right? Even some of the Boros Energy decks have Chant in the sideboard to combat the combo decks, and the blue-white deck just gets to play 4 of the main decks. So that seems like an uphill battle as well. Boros Energy here. Boros Energy kind of in a weird spot where I think that Boros Energy is a very, very big dog to Titan. I think that the Affinity matchup is close and heavily relies on play draw. It's decent against Prowess. It's not great against Blink. It's not great against Birdscale. I don't know if I would necessarily, if I'm willing to put Boros in A tier with any of these decks. I'll put it in high B. I'll put it over Eldrazi Tron. But yeah, I don't really think I would consider playing Boros over any of the decks in A tier, which crazy to me, right? But Boros has been the best deck in Modern at various points for quite some time now. Over the past, 7-8 months, it feels. It's just been, even after the One Ring got banned. Basically, ever since the banning of Underworld Breach, Boros has been the best deck for basically the entirety of the past 8 months, it feels. And not like that anymore. I just don't think the matchup spread is there. I think that you're a dog to all the combo decks. The only good matchup I think in the top tier is maybe Prowess, but I do think Boros is behind against basically everything else. Now, the last 2 decks here, not heavily represented in Houston, but I wanted to get to a total number of 20, so these were the next decks that were available on Goldfish. I don't really think either of them are fantastic. I'm going to put Living End in, not quite lowest of D, but I'm going to put Living End in D tier and Neoform. I'll put Neoform slightly above Ruby Storm, but I think it has similar problems where it's just the format is not quite right for combo decks like this. Again, Orum's Chant, huge problem for Living End, and even Neoform as well. There's just Neoform has, it's sort of this all-in deck where, these decks are good against Boros, these sort of all-in combo decks. And that's kind of where they came from, is people started playing Neoform and Living End because of its, very favorable Boros matchup. But as Boros starts to fall below and below and below, then those decks certainly have, you basically end up with less reasons to play those decks if less people are playing Boros. So that's it. The 20 best decks in Modern. I like where this tier list ended up. I think I agree. Well, I'm just trying to look at and see if there's anything else I want to change last minute. But yeah, I think for the most part, this looks pretty good. Don't let the Amulet players tell you their deck is bad, because it's the best deck in the format, and I don't think it's particularly close. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought, if there's anything about this tier list that you would change, and if there's any tier lists that you would like to see in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Adios.